I'm betting that if I were to take a poll this morning and ask if you have ever made plans for your life that were interrupted, almost everyone here would say that yes, you have. It may have been plans for just the next hour. Maybe you wanted to take a nap, but a spam call interrupted it. And after you got the phone silenced and began to drift off to sleep again, the sound of the cat barfing on the rug put an end to that. Or you may have made plans for the weekend. Finally, after weeks, maybe even months of no time off, you planned your dream getaway weekend. You've rented a condo on the beach, a condo with no phone and no barfing cats, and then you start to run a fever and you test positive for COVID, and you watch as your getaway weekend goes down the drain. Or maybe you had your whole life mapped out, not only to be interrupted by, well, life. I've had my share of detours over my lifetime, but none more dramatic than when I decided that after analyzing water data for 20 years at the U.S. Geological Survey, I needed to become a queer minister. With the continued spread of AIDS, the suicide of a friend who couldn't resolve his sexuality with his spirituality, and the growing public awareness of brutal violence against LGBTQ people, I knew I needed to do something with my life other than oversee the publication of water data. As horrific as the things were that led me to this place in life, and as aggravating as the daily tedium can be, I feel I'm where I'm supposed to be, even if it wasn't on my destination list that I had drawn up while mapping out my life. In this morning's text, Jesus and the disciples have set anchor near a town that wasn't on their destination list either. A few verses earlier, after a full day's work of feeding more than 5,000 people, Jesus decided to spend some quiet time with God. So he dismissed the crowd and sent the disciples ahead to Bethsaida. But they never made it there. Instead, a storm rose up, causing them to strain and struggle against the wind. Fortunately, Jesus came to the rescue, walking across the water toward them. And as he got in the boat, the wind died down. But they had been knocked off course, and they found themselves anchored near the village of Gennesaret instead of their planned destination of Bethsaida. Now, they weren't so far away that they couldn't make their way to Bethsaida. After all, it was only about 5 miles away. But it seems that maybe God had other plans for them. There was ministry that needed to happen in Gennesaret. And although it took a storm on the sea to get them there, they were where they were supposed to be because there were a whole lot of people who needed healing. No one gets through life without encountering a few storms, sometimes more than just a few. The circumstances may be different, but we all know what it's like to go through a storm that lands us in a place we hadn't counted on. A health diagnosis that leaves you unable to do what you used to be able to do. A financial crisis that forces you to postpone your retirement. The death of a loved one that shatters your life into a million pieces and you don't know if you can go on. Now, I'm not going to go all Rebecca of Sunnybrook form on you and tell you that if you just keep a good attitude and a smile on your face, everything will turn out fine and you'll come through your storm with newfound wisdom and grace. If you're like me, I look for someone to blame for my storms. And if I can't find anyone, then I always can blame God. And left to my own devices, I will stew in my poop until I stink so bad that no one can stand to be around me. But when I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, if I'm lucky, I look around and discover that there are things that need tending to. And instead of focusing on what I can't do, I have the option of turning my attention to what I'm able to do, even if it wasn't in my carefully laid out plans. Jesus and the disciples weren't where they had planned on being. But it didn't take any time at all for them to discover that they were needed right where they were. We read that as soon as they got out of the boat, people from the whole region began to bring the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was, and wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. It would seem that Jesus' life was one interruption after another. He entered the synagogue, and his Sabbath routine was interrupted by a man with a withered hand that needed restoring. He tried to get some shut-eye in the stern of the boat, and a storm arose on the sea which needed his calming. He was on his way to heal the daughter of a synagogue leader when he was interrupted by a woman who had wasted all her savings on doctors who couldn't cure her condition. He had planned on spending some quiet time with his disciples when he was interrupted by more than 5,000 hungry people. We'll see in a couple weeks that he's still looking for a quiet getaway in the region of Tyre when he's again interrupted, this time by a Syrophoenician woman who insists that he heal her daughter. The question is not whether we will experience interruptions in life that take on the shape of turbulent storms or annoying detours. The question for us is, what will we do with our lives after we have been interrupted? If Jesus is our model, then wherever we find ourselves, we need to be about the business of healing the brokenness we find around us. And that looks different for different people. So what are the interruptions in your life that you're dealing with? And where is God in all that? Because you see, it's possible that God is present both in your plans and in your interruptions, in your accomplishments and in your seeming failures, in your celebrations and in your pain. In fact, it's likely that wherever you find yourself, if you're open to the possibility, you'll experience God right beside you, beneath you, above you, and within you, inspiring and urging you toward the spread of God's reign on earth as it is in heaven. May the storms in your life be brief and few, but following the storm's interruption, may you feel God's Spirit working in you and through you in the place where you have landed. Amen.